This video is not a review. I don't own the Hoka Mach X or the Saucony Kinvara Pro, and I don't plan on running in either shoe. Instead, this is going to be a critique from a few different angles, an average runner's perspective and a product development and design and marketing perspective about a trend that I see these two shoes representing of normalizing plated shoes as daily trainers. Now, I don't have any problem with training in a plated shoe. I do it very often. But we've had this class of shoes called tempo trainers for quite a long time now. In fact, the Nike Zoom Fly that came out as a companion shoe to the original Vaporfly 4% really is the shoe that originated this category. And what that was meant to be was a fast training shoe that has some of the technology from the race shoe trickled down into a more affordable or durable package that is reserved for that faster running or those faster workouts where you don't want to have to burn through your race shoe. And that has worked for a long time. And I think a lot of us as runners, that's how we've actually built our rotations around that. But I think the Hoka Mach X and the Saucony Kinvara Pro represent both those brands now trying to normalize a plated shoe as a daily trainer. And whether that's the product teams or not, from a marketing perspective, that's where there is a huge push. And that's what I think is actually problematic. So let's start with the Hoka Mach X. And let's look at it from the average runner's perspective. And by average runner, I mean it's not you and it's not me. This is someone who's not watching YouTube videos about running shoes. This is someone who runs probably pretty frequently, a few days a week, maybe 5 days a week. And they're running, 5, 8, maybe 10 miles. I mean, they're not casual runners, but they're also not, someone who's spending a lot of time thinking about the tech, digging into the tech and really understanding what all these shoes are. And whether I think we like it or not, us shoe nerds, I actually think these are probably the majority of people buying running shoes nowadays, particularly now in 2023. While we may love the tech and we may love to come here on YouTube and talk about it and, debate about it, these average runners are the bulk of people buying running shoes. And something like the Mach X, I think, is a bit of a problem for them. And here's the scenario that I have in mind. This average runner, they probably started, let's say 5 years ago, and they started in a Hoka Clifton. And that worked well. They, they built up some miles. Maybe they did a 5K race and they're like, okay, I want to take running a little bit more seriously. So they went and looked at Hoka because, again, they had name recognition. They liked the brand. They had a good experience with the Clifton. And they look and see what's available. And they see, oh, the Mach. That looks like an interesting shoe. And they bought the Mach. And that was probably, let's say, the Mach 4. And this is the type of runner who maybe only buys 1 or 2 pairs of shoes a year, if that. And they stick with what they know. It's kind of one of those, if it ain't broke, don't fix it sort of things. So when they bought that Mach, they ran a lot in the Mach 4. They loved it. When the Mach 4 was dead and they needed a new shoe, they went to Hoka. They saw the Mach 5. Boom, obvious. I'm going to get that shoe. They went in that shoe, and that was great. It worked out well for them. But now the Mach 5 is, they put a lot of miles in it. They need to replace it. So they go back to Hoka, and they're looking for the Mach 6 or a sale on the Mach 5, which they don't really see. But now they see this thing called the Mach X. They're intrigued. Maybe they feel they want to step it up a little bit. They see that Mach X, it looks like it's thicker, it looks like there's more shoe there, it looks like it should be softer, more cushy, everything they think a running shoe should be. They don't see a Mach 6, so they see the X, so they click buy, and now they're running daily in a plated trainer. And again, there's nothing, this runner's not doing anything wrong, they're just not paying attention to the tech, and frankly, they kind of don't care. And again, that's not a negative. They want to buy a running shoe that looks like it's going to do the job. They have the recognition of this brand and this model. This is the new one. That's what I'm going to buy. It looks cool. Let's go. And now they're running in a plated trainer. And I see that as a problem. Now, moving to the Saucony Kinvara Pro, I actually see this as a bigger issue. And I'm going to base a lot of what I'm going to talk about in this section on a podcast that recently came out from Doctors of Running, where they interviewed the VP and head of product engineering and one of the senior product engineers from Saucony. And they talked a lot about the development of the Kinvara Pro and what they were trying to accomplish. And there were a lot of warning lights that went off in this podcast for me. I'll put a link in the description if you want to go check it out. Like all Doctors of Running podcasts, it's great. It was actually a really good episode. It's just some of the reasoning for this shoe's development left a lot to be desired for me. And that's why I'm actually making this video. It's actually what instigated this video. So let's look at this from a product development and design standpoint, and then I'll get to marketing. And then I'll tie this all back together with the average runner. So from a product development standpoint, the Kinvara Pro really feels like a design team that's overthinking and over-designing everything. And they're not getting out of the lab to understand how their customers use their shoes, but more importantly, understand their shoes, understand the products they're developing. Because the Kinvara Pro is a classic example of an over-designed shoe of a product team that is isolating itself in the lab, in the development, and really just sort of min-maxing all the technologies they have available and building a product that on paper is great and tests well in the lab. And, you get this extra performance and that's all great. But when you put it into the real world and consumers start using it, it causes a lot of problems because there is already overlap with another product. And now with Saucony, that's the Endorphin series, which has been very successful. So to the average runner, where does the Kinvara Pro work with the Endorphin? Thinking about the average runner, I've seen the Endorphin everywhere. My friend runs in the Endorphin. He loves the Endorphin. It's like, where does this new shoe differ from the Endorphin? But again, it just feels like it's over-designed. From a product standpoint, they didn't really need this shoe in the line. From a testing and development standpoint, yeah, this shoe performs really well and it has a very marginal gain for this sort of runner. But do we really need that? Do the runners really need that shoe? And then even more so, and this is maybe the more disturbing perspective on this, what if the drive for this is coming from the marketing group? Now, I don't think you can argue that Saucony has been very successful with the Endorphin series. To be blunt, it took Saucony from a brand that really no one was interested in to maybe one of the hotter brands in running, maybe not in elite level performance racing, but at least for everyday runners. Because again, the Endorphin series has been very successful, and I think they really redefined the category of tempo trainer, and they've extended what it can do. And for a runner like you or me who understands technology, understands the importance of having a running shoe rotation, it's totally fine because we can slot these products in to a larger rotation. And we know that if we're going to do a lot of training in a plated trainer, then, we're going to balance it off with a more neutral trainer, maybe the Kinvara, if you want to stick with Saucony. And Saucony makes some other non-plated daily trainer options. That's all great. But when marketing gets involved in that, I think they've leaned in heavily to the Endorphin. Again, it's revitalized Saucony as a brand. So obviously the marketing team wants more tech to sell because we're in this era of running right now where tech sells. So is that what instigated this shoe? Did the marketing department say we need another product with a lot of tech in it to, sell to our customers? I hope not. I've worked in a lot of product companies where marketing does drive it. It doesn't matter what the product team thinks, or they're trying to just build really great products and, the great product's going to sell itself sort of thing. It often doesn't work like that. And that's just the reality of working in a large company and product design in general. So regardless though, whichever reason instigated this shoe and why this shoe is coming out and why it's being marketed as an everyday trainer, it still just seems like, why does this need to exist? There was another thing that came out on this podcast that I found interesting, actually. I didn't expect this, but I found it very interesting. They were talking about where the name for the Kinvara Pro comes from. And they were talking about like why Kinvara. And the Saucony employees were talking about, the Kinvara has its roots in the minimalist trend, of 10, 11 years ago. And that's true because the Kinvara really was Saucony's more minimalist, flexible, neutral trainer shoe. And it's evolved a bit since then, but that's really where it comes from. And it was a great shoe. It was a great version of that. I think it was probably one of the better ones that took the minimalist or barefoot ideal and turned it into something that is much more usable for more runners. And when they were explaining why the Kinvara name, they were saying they've always seen the Kinvara line as something that can jump onto trends. And that I found extremely disheartening because they're right. This is a trend. I don't think Saucony alone is creating this trend. Obviously, Hoka is doing that. New Balance has a shoe they're pushing in this way. Adidas has the Boston 12, which is sort of doing this. So they're not alone. But I think because of how important and successful the endorphin has been for average runners, I think this is going to set a precedent for this new trend. And this new trend is normalizing plated shoes as daily trainers. In the grand scheme of things, is this the end of the world? Is this the end of running? No, I don't think it is. Is everyone automatically going to get hurt and go off and have all these problems? No, I also don't think that is. I think the science and the research, what little has been done, has shown that plated shoes don't necessarily cause more injuries. They may shift where those injuries are, meaning probably more in the knees, thighs, and hips, but they don't actually cause more. The thing that I'm worried about here, though, is I do think this is a trend, and I think it's one that's only just starting because, as they said, this shoe's development, the Saucony Kinvara Pro's development, started 2 to 3 years ago, and that's about right for product development. Product development, at the very least, to launch a new product takes at least 2 to 3 years. So the shoes that we're seeing released in 2023 were started back in 2020 in most instances, maybe a little bit further back. So we are only at the start of this trend of, again, normalizing plated shoes as daily trainers. And I think we'll see more over the next 1 to 2 years. And then ultimately, I think it will die down a bit. But if we look at running moves in cycles. There is a new trend every 10 or so years. And 5 years from now, there will be another trend. So this generation, you could call it, of average runners who are now running full-time in a plated shoe, 5 years from now, when the industry shifts to whatever is next, and I have no idea what that will be, but it's setting up a lot of people now that have spent years in these plated daily trainers that now have lost a lot of foot strength, leg strength. They maybe have shifted a lot of their gait to only be able to run in these highly engineered, high stack, cambered or rockered shoes with plates. And when the next thing comes out, whatever that is, probably won't be a high stack plated shoe. Where are they left? Because if you think back to what the minimalist barefoot thing did with running, 10, 12 years ago, you had a lot of runners that automatically jumped into these minimalist shoes and they started getting a lot of injuries or at least soreness because their calves weren't ready for it, their Achilles weren't ready, their feet weren't ready for it. So I think this is setting up a precedent for something like that happening in running. And again, is the sky falling? Is this the end of running? No, I don't think it is. And I may be obsessed over this issue because, again, I think as a runner, training, whether you're training for a race or you're just training as a runner, alternating stimulus on your legs, your feet, and your body, meaning rotating different shoes, is vital because that's how you maximize training. And if you're only running in a non-plated shoe, I would say add in a plated shoe. If you're only running in plated shoes, I would tell you add in some non-plated shoes. Running in any one thing all the time, that's the problem here. But again, from a marketing standpoint, from a product standpoint, if we're going to see more of these products, and I think we're going to, that just means more average runners are only going to be running in these shoes. And that, I think, ultimately will be a bit of an issue. Let me know in the comments below what you think about this issue. I know maybe I'm worrying about it a little too much. Maybe I'm exaggerating the problem in my mind, and that could be true. But let me know in the comments below what you think about these shoes. Do you have no problem running in a plated shoe all the time? Or do you want to reserve them for maybe those more impactful workouts or the days you need a little extra something to get out the door? Like, again, these shoes are useful. It's just not all of the time. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you found this content useful, hit that subscribe button. You'll see more content like this pop up in your feed. Otherwise, drop a like on this video because it helps this channel continue to grow, which I'm always appreciative of. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.